Hello, and welcome to today's sleep story. My name is Sarina, and today I'll be reading a sleep story about the dance of healing. Find a comfortable position and take a deep inhale and exhale. Close your eyes and allow any tension to melt into the surface beneath you. Today you will be guided into a deep and relaxing sleep. The world seemed quieter at night. For Leonardo, silence wasn't always welcome. In the stillness, pain often roared louder, a relentless hum that gripped both his body and his mind. Tonight though, as the stars winked faintly through his bedroom window, something stirred within him beyond the ache. Perhaps it was the faint memory of a story he'd once heard, or a whisper of something greater waiting for him in the world. Leonardo had always been no stranger to pain. His back ached with every movement. His legs stiffened like stone, and his mind carried a weight far heavier than any physical burden. Life, for years, had been a series of calculated movements. How to sit without wincing, how to smile without showing the strain, how to fall asleep despite the discomfort. And yet, on this night, Leonardo's restless mind drifted to a question he couldn't ignore. Was there something he hadn't tried yet? The next morning, he woke with a sense of purpose. Not a roaring ambition, but a quiet nudge, as though the universe had gently pressed its finger to his soul. He stretched, slowly and carefully, as he always did. But instead of heading straight to his chair by the window, he turned on an old, dusty radio, tucked away in the corner of the room. A soft, lilting tune began to play, and almost instinctively, Leonardo shifted his weight. He lifted his arms, moved his shoulders, and let the music guide him. The movement wasn't grand or graceful, but it was something. And in that moment, it felt like everything. Over the weeks that followed, Leonardo's small moments of movement became a daily ritual. He found solace in the sway of his body and the rhythm of music. At first, it felt awkward. His body resisted, the pain flaring up as if to remind him it was still there. But he persisted, his movements becoming a language, one that his body and mind slowly began to understand. The pain, though still present, felt less oppressive, as though the act of moving had given him a way to coexist with the pain rather than fight against it. Leonardo started to notice changes. His steps felt lighter, his thoughts less clouded. The once overwhelming weight of his inner turmoil began to lift, revealing pockets of clarity he hadn't known existed. Movement, he realized, was not just a physical act, but a form of liberation, a way to release the emotions he'd held tightly within for so long. One afternoon, while wandering through the local park, Leonardo came across a small gathering. A group of people had formed a circle, their laughter and chatter spilling into the crisp air. Intrigued, he approached and saw that they were moving together, their steps coordinated but loose, like a dance meant for joy rather than perfection. A woman noticed him lingering at the edge of the circle. "Come join us," she said warmly. Leonardo hesitated, but eventually stepped forward his movements tentative. The group welcomed him without question, their energy contagious. For the first time, Leonardo felt part of something bigger than himself. A collective rhythm that pulsed with connection and healing. Encouraged by the experience, Leonardo began to explore different forms of movement. He tried yoga, learning to balance strength with flexibility. He discovered Tai Chi, finding peace in its meditative flow. Each practice brought him closer to understanding his body and the power it held. He started to share his story with others, speaking about the profound transformation he'd experienced through movement. And to his surprise, people listened. Leonardo's journey took him beyond his small town. He travelled to cities and villages, joining communities in parks, community centres, and open fields. He led workshops where he encouraged people to move in whatever way felt right to them. There was no right or wrong, only the freedom to explore what their bodies could do. People came to his sessions with their own pain, some physical, some emotional, and left with a spark of hope, inspired by Leonardo's story and the gentle yet powerful reminder that healing often begins with a single step. During his travels, Leonardo began to notice something profound. As much as movement helped, so did the sharing of stories. When people spoke of their struggles, their pain became lighter, as if the simple act of putting it into words released it into the air. Leonardo listened intently to the tales of others, gathering them like precious jewels. A woman in a small village shared how she'd found peace tending her garden after years of grieving. A young man in a busy city described how drumming brought him solace from a lifetime of feeling unheard. These stories intertwined with Leonardo's own, forming a tapestry of resilience and connection. Inspired, Leonardo began to weave storytelling into his workshops. He would open each session with a short tale, sometimes his own, sometimes borrowed from those he'd met along the way. Participants were encouraged to share their experiences if they felt comfortable, creating a safe space where pain could be acknowledged and joy rediscovered. The stories became as powerful as the movement itself, building bridges between people from all walks of life. One evening, after a particularly moving session in a remote mountain village, Leonardo sat by a crackling fire, surrounded by the participants. The stars above seemed impossibly bright, their light reflecting in the eyes of those gathered. A young girl, no older than 8, approached him shyly and asked him, "Why do you do this?" Leonardo smiled gently, thinking of how far he'd come. "Because once I thought I was alone in my pain, and then I discovered that by moving and sharing, I wasn't alone at all. I want everybody to know they're never alone." The girl nodded, her small face thoughtful. "I think I want to help people too," she said. Leonardo's heart swelled with gratitude. In that moment, he realized the effect of his journey. Each person he touched carried a piece of his story forward, creating waves of healing that extended far beyond what he could see. As the years passed, Leonardo's work continued to grow. His workshops turned into festivals where hundreds gathered to celebrate the joy of movement and storytelling. He founded an organization aptly named the Dance of Healing, which brought programs to schools, hospitals, and communities. Teams of volunteers and practitioners trained in Leonardo's methods spread his message to every corner of the globe. Despite his expanding reach, Leonardo remained deeply connected to his roots. He still began each day with his own practice. Whether it was a simple stretch by his window or a slow walk through a quiet forest. He continued to collect stories, writing them down in journals that filled the shelves of his home. And whenever he could, he returned to the places where his journey had begun. The park where he joined the circle, the small studio where he'd first tried yoga, and the quiet corner of his living room where he'd taken his first steps to music. One day, Leonardo received a letter from a young woman in a distant country. She wrote about how she'd attended one of his workshops during a particularly dark time in her life. "I was ready to give up," she wrote. "But then I saw you move, and I felt something shift inside me. I started moving too, just a little at first. And now I'm teaching others in my village. Thank you for showing me the way." Leonardo read the letter with tears in his eyes. It was a reminder of the simple truth he'd learnt through his journey. Healing is not a destination, but a process, one that grows stronger when shared. The stars above twinkled as if they were dancing, forming constellations that had guided sailors and dreamers for centuries. Leonardo thought about how the act of movement connected him to something timeless, something greater than himself. He recalled the countless faces he had met, the hands he had held, and the lives he had touched. Each one was part of the same dance, a universal rhythm of healing and growth. As the waves lapped at his feet, he began to reflect on his journey. He thought back to that first morning, when he had risen from his chair and taken his first tentative steps to music. how far he had come since then. What had started as a personal quest for relief had blossomed into a mission that spanned continents. He smiled, knowing that the ripples of his journey would continue to spread long after he was gone. The night deepened, and a cool breeze carried with it the scent of salt and seaweed. Around him, a small group of locals who had followed his teachings began to gather, creating an impromptu circle. Without words, they started to move, their steps guided by the rhythm of the ocean. Leonardo joined them, his movements fluid and unhurried. Together they danced beneath the stars, their shared energy a testament to the power of connection and healing. Sleep well, and let the story of Leonardo inspire you and allow you to drift off into a peaceful, deep sleep.